Okay.
Yeah.
All right, guys, we're back in the studio with my guest, T-Wall. T-Wall's a real estate developer, entrepreneur, conservative, political donator.
Yes.
And
Aggregator.
motivator. He just makes shit happen, and that's who you want to surround yourself with, folks. And that's why he's a guest on CMG University podcast. This podcast, we're going to get into entrepreneurship, investing, advice for guys just getting started, leadership. There's endless we could talk about, but let's get into what we were discussing last night over dinner about hiring, firing, and over the years, give us a couple bullet points of what you've learned about, bringing people on. Maybe we can talk about a recent topic about firing people. So when someone employs a team member, and like maybe they're young like me, they don't know if they're good or not, and they string the chicken along too long. What advice do you have looking back on your career?
Well, I've hired hundreds of people and fired plenty also, unfortunately. Usually when they get fired, though, they know it's coming.
Right.
They're not surprised with us because we give them plenty of opportunities.
Right.
But our goal is to find the right sort of, don't put the square peg in the round hole, right? Try to find the right fit for the right job.
Right.
You wouldn't hire an accountant to go do sales. You wouldn't hire a salesperson to sit at a workstation do accounting because they'd go crazy.
Right.
So it's all about finding the right fit. And that is difficult. And the hardest thing I find today is it's just difficult to find people who really want to work, who really enjoy working, and the passion of working. I recall years ago hiring interns, for example.
Right.
The interns would pay for their own tuition, pay for their own food, and beer money, and they would pay for everything. They'd have jobs to earn that money. Their parents weren't paying for anything, and they were ready to hit the street running. They wanted to work because they wanted to earn money.
Right.
Then that transitioned to the parents are covering the tuition, the beer money you got to pay for yourself, so you might have a part-time job.
Right.
Then it transitioned to, between scholarships or mom and dad, whatever, everything's being covered. The kids haven't had any jobs in high school or college. They might be on sports teams, which is good, but they haven't had a job. So they come to us as an intern who has no job, no experience. And I always say, I don't ever want to be the first employer for somebody.
Right.
Because that's such a shock for this generation. They're not used to it. I started off delivering newspapers, when I was 11 years old till I was 12 and 13. And that meant, in Wisconsin, that meant going out in the dark in the morning, and if it's 20 below zero, you're still delivering that paper. It doesn't matter. It could be pouring rain, thunderstorm, lightning, whatever, you deliver that paper.
You're getting the job done.
Yeah. And the people, I was delivering to people like Oscar Mayer, to former governors, because our neighborhood was made up of sort of the business community, is where the governor's mansion was located. So they really wanted their paper, and they wanted to put in the screen door. It wasn't just throw it on the driveway and they come out in their robe. No. The door, the paper was put inside the door, every single house, and some of the driveways were 500 feet long.
Right.
Kids today don't have that experience, right?
They don't.
I was doing lawn mowing, picking weeds by hand. I worked at a bike store as my first real job, and doing sales of bikes. I was terrible at maintenance of the bikes, but I was good at sales. Worked at a sporting goods store for 3 years. And that meant showing up on time, taking it seriously, handling money. Dealing with customers, and students today don't get that experience.
They don't have the basics.
Right. And it's because the world has changed. Their parents are providing too much for them. Right. And so it's just a huge mistake, I think, for parents to provide too much for kids. They need to tell their kids, no, we don't have that kind of money, even if they do, or we can't afford that, even if they do. They need to stop giving so much. Just like I talked about in the last podcast, the kid who had been given a Cadillac by his parents. They felt sorry for him because he had a disability, and this was kind of their way to alleviate their guilt. And he had never made that connection, until then. And I told him, you need to, forge out on your own. You need to work hard.
Yeah.
Stop relying on your parents. Stop coasting.
Right.
So I use a tool called Predictive Index. I like that. It's an online tool that is a personality profile. It's not a test, but it's a personality profile. So I always have all my candidates that I'm going to interview take that before they come so that I'm not influencing the outcome. So they take that beforehand, they send it to me in advance, and I can read their profile. And I have a profile for the job. And usually, out of all the profiles, you can usually have 3 or 4 maybe match up for the job. Mm-hmm. So, for example, in accounting, you're looking for somebody detailed, organized, numbers-oriented, these kinds of things, right? Salesperson, you want somebody who's more extrovert, a talker.
Right.
Don't look for a salesperson to be like doing a bunch of paperwork. Then you got the wrong person. So the predictive index, it just helps us think about the person, think about the job, think about who's a good fit, weed out some candidates.
Right.
So I love using that tool. Another little trick I use is I've used in the past is sometimes I'll walk the person out to their car. So after the interview, I say, hey, let me walk you out to the car, and I'll take them all the way out to the parking lot, and then I'll look in their car. And the worst example was the woman whose car was completely full in the back seat, floor to ceiling, of empty 2-liter Mountain Dew bottles.
Oh my gosh.
Plastic 2-liter bottles. Just floored. And so when she was done drinking a 2-liter bottle, and she didn't pour it into a cup, she would drink it right from the 2-liter bottle, and terribly overweight. And then when she was done, she wouldn't put the cap on. She'd just throw it in the back seat.
No, I seriously mean this when I say this. I need to pray for her.
Yes.
No, I'm serious.
Yeah, right.
Because she's killing herself when she's drinking that.
No, right.
And so
it's over the top.
It's horrible.
But the lesson is, I didn't hire her because somebody who treats their car like that, because they're disorganized. It's not the drinking. It's the fact that she would let her car become I won't even say the garbage dump that she's driving around with. Mm-hmm. That, to me, spoke to me about what kind of person she is, and that's not the kind of person I want, right? I would love it if I could go to their current job and see if they're working a desk job, to see their desk, is it disorganized or is it organized? Because if it's totally disorganized, then, you probably don't want that person.
Right.
So there's you got to find ways to find little clues about people. I'd say that I break everything kind of into thirds. There's a third of people who will set up an interview and that won't even show up. Those are people who are collecting unemployment. They just gotta write it on a piece of paper and turn it in the unemployment office. I did an interview. They never show up, so the unemployment doesn't call to verify.
Right.
But they said they had an interview, but it never occurred. But they got to show that to collect their next check. Then there's the third that are on the other end are seriously interested, and your question of trying to find the right fit. And then there's the middle third, and you're trying to figure them out. Some of them are like, I did an interview with somebody that had run for the U.S. Senate back in 2010, and I had a driver, and really great guy, and he knew everybody in the state, and really super guy. And he's 40 now, and I interviewed him a week ago for basically a social media job, do all of my social media, And he just showed no energy, no passion. And I told him flat out, I said, come on, show me some energy, do you want this job or don't you? Right? I don't want to drag this out of you.
Right. No, you don't.
And I knew halfway through the lunch interview that I was not going to hire him.
Right.
Because he had no energy, no passion, no enthusiasm. He was like, well, I'm not sure if I'm going to do this or that. I'm not sure if this is a good fit. I'm like, you're trained in technology. That's your job. You're good at this sort of thing. He was your driver, if you don't take this job, well, that was when he was younger, in his 20s, and he was helping out as a volunteer.
Oh, I see.
Right. So I just meant that I had known him,
right?
And that he was a good person, and he knew a lot of people,
right?
And he had the capability. Now, my point is, he has the capabilities. I knew him, right? He has the ability to do the job well.
So let's dive into that.
He chooses not to.
Right. And let's dive into that. Right. So we're both business owners. We both employ team members.
Right.
Sometimes, like you just said, you see a possibility in someone. Like, people. We know people. I have buddies.
And they don't see that in themselves.
They don't see it. Number one, or they there's multiple things. Right. They don't see it in themselves, and we can't push it out of you.
Exactly.
I'm not a nonprofit. I'm not here to make you a paycheck for you to. So don't give that person a job. So let's talk about
In fact, I have a plaque on my desk that said, "This is not a nonprofit organization."
Oh my gosh!
just so they get it clear.
I should, Should put that at my shop. No, I'm just kidding. But
That's right.
so, all right. So let's talk about, like, you just gave some amazing tips for interviewing people. Like, if there's no energy,
Right.
get out.
Yeah.
What do you at the end of that lunch, how did you leave it?
I knew I wasn't going to hire him, but I didn't want to cut it off. I wanted to give him the opportunity just because I did know him. If he was going to make a decision, I'd like it to be his decision. And based on his behavior, it was clear that he didn't want the job. In irony, he was in a government job, dead-ended because he was on the wrong side of the administration at the time, right? If you're one side or the other and you're in government, and sometimes the other side will shut down those people in government who are not in line with their philosophy. Okay, that's politics.
Was he laid off or no?
No. He's in a job that wasn't going anywhere.
Okay.
And basically they had stripped away all his responsibility.
Okay.
He's been in there coasting along for 6 years, and there's no hope, no end in sight. And why are you staying in that job?
Yeah.
Right?
Listen, let's stay away from those guys. We'll get your social media handled just fine, and you don't have to
Yeah,
hold
right.
W2. You know what I'm
Exactly.
saying? Like,
right.
yeah,
But he had called me, right, and wanted to get advice and wanted to talk about job opportunity. My point is, he had the capability. If he had made the decision in his head that he was going to do everything possible to get this new job, and even if this wasn't the perfect job, if he took it for 2 or 3 or 4 years, it would lead to another opportunity. But there are too many people out there who think they got to find the perfect job, right? So when I started working at 15 in a bike store,
yep.
I first got Rody Wanton. That was his name, the owner of the bike shop. It was a Schwinn bike shop. And Rody was crudgeon, guy. And he didn't want to hire me. I'm a 15-year-old. I look like I'm 12 or 11.
Right.
And he said, well, if you go take a bike maintenance course, then I'll hire you. I'm like, okay, fine. Now, he thought, and he was correct, 9 out of 10 people would have just walked away and never taken that course. I went and took the course. And I went back to him. I had the nerve to go back to him and say, okay, I took the bike maintenance course. He's like, well, yeah, what? Like, well, you said you would hire me if I took this course.
Yep.
And I took it and I completed it. Here's my certificate.
Yep.
And he looks at me like, damn, I did say that, didn't I? And I'm like, yes, you did. He says, all right, fine, And so what does he do? Rody had the philosophy is you can't work on the sales floor unless you first work for a year in the shop, which is doing maintenance, putting bikes together, doing maintenance on bikes. And so what does he do? He puts me in the shop. Now, I knew that was the wrong fit because I'd been selling him on the idea I would sell bikes because I'm a good salesperson. Right? And I was good in selling everything as a kid. I was the guy who collected the Campbell soup labels throughout our whole neighborhood, 600 homes, I was the one selling ropes and wreaths at record numbers for the Boy
You never
Scouts.
got into selling drugs or anything?
No.
Okay.
No.
Right. Some people start out like that, Terrence, in high school.
Ropes and wreaths of the Boy Scouts.
Okay.
Yeah,
good.
But the point is, so he took me on, and I went in the bike shop, and I was there for 3 days, and all the maintenance guys deliberately refused to show me anything. No training, just put together the bike. I couldn't even put together a child's bike, literally, from the box, right? Open the box up, put it together. Not that hard. I couldn't even do that. Because I'm not a handyman,
Okay.
And they were all laughing at me. These are the blue-collar sweat monkeys, right? They, they just thought this was so funny, that this high school kid, know-it-all, whatever, right? And couldn't put together a bike. So after 3 days, Rody comes back. It's like, you can't seem to put together a bike. I said, yes, but I can sell bikes. Will you just let me on the sales floor?
Right.
And I showed passion and energy and enthusiasm, and I absolutely begged him, and he gave in. And within 12 months, I was the number 2 salesperson. As a 15-year-old working part-time, I was the number 2 salesperson in that store. He would give me raises without even telling me that he gave me a raise. I would just find it in my check, and I go, I think you made a mistake. He goes, no, I didn't make a mistake. I'm giving you a raise because you're doing a great job. I was selling bikes out that door so fast they couldn't keep up. But the point is, I didn't give up.
Right.
Showed grit, persistence. I got some training from the bike course, right, the maintenance course. But I already knew how to sell, and I just had to convince him to let me sell. And once he did, I sold like crazy.
Right.
In the wintertime, you're selling hockey gear. I didn't know anything about hockey. So I studied about hockey. I read up on skates, on hockey gear, and I became the expert in hockey. And I would sell hockey equipment even though I knew nothing about hockey.
Right.
But that's because I showed the energy and enthusiasm.
Yeah.
what would kids do today? They'd be like, I don't know anything about hockey. I can't do it. I can't sell hockey. I got to sit over here in the corner.
Right.
No, you can, sell anything if you really put your mind to it.
100. You can do anything.
Right.
Like literally. So I agree with that 100%. Yeah. And I think part of that maybe is like you knew yourself at a young age and what you kind of lean towards and what not.
Which is sales,
and it probably came from you were Campbell's soup cans before that. Like you got out there and experimented and kind of like hustled. And then at 15, you kind of knew what direction you wanted. Same thing here. Right. Like you just got to go out, experiment, see what you like, see what you don't like, or see what you're good at, most importantly. Not every job that a team member, a W-2 person is in likes. There's no job that everyone likes 100% of the time. Right. Exactly. Right. I don't like doing my taxes. I don't like, getting the inspections done on my trucks. Like I have people for that. Yeah. So it's just that's what it is. Now, Terrence, let's go back to as an entrepreneur, we're hiring, firing people. Yeah. Give us some advice. What were we going to say?
Well, I was going to say, I want to say one thing that. Later in life, you never know what things are going to lead to, right? Mm-hmm. So as delivering newspapers, mowing business executives' lawns, working at the local bike store where the parents, the business executives would bring their kids in to buy the hiking gear, the bikes, etc. So later in life, when I went to launch my own business, right, the real estate business, the banker knew me, the car dealer that knew me, all these people knew me. Oscar Mayer, he knew me from delivering the papers, right? Yes. Chris Farley's mom would bring me in when I went to collect money for the newspapers, and
they know, like, and trust you.
Yes, and they would invite me into their home in the wintertime. Can I give you some hot cocoa? And collect. I'm trying to collect my money, and they'd bring me in their home. The moms would, and so the moms and the dads, especially the moms, they all knew me. Right. So when I launched, they already had familiarity with me, and they trusted me, and 100%. They knew as a salesperson, and so that let's go to the next step, and that's the point. You can't start up here. You got to take the baby steps, right?
Build the foundation.
And build the foundation. I always say you can't build the house without pouring the foundation first. Right. Right.
Now, we hear this phrase a lot, or at least I do, and I use this a lot. Your network is your net worth.
Yes.
Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yes, because it's all who you know.
It's all about who
and it doesn't have to be important people. It can be anybody. But
anybody from, like you said, a handyman that can paint a wall. Right. To the banker you walk in, you got to buy the property from. Right. That's you delivered papers and we're a big person amongst your community by delivering a piece of paper.
Exactly.
This in today's world,
it's reliable. They knew I was reliable, and that I would follow through.
Well, in today's world, for people that are listening, it's no papers really get delivered today, but you can go out on social media and post on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and a lot of times like. I'll go to clients' houses or bankers, and they'll already know who I am, or they've already seen all my videos and like, all right, well, we're going to invite this 23-year-old landscaper to our executive CEO banker party, even though everyone else is wearing suits and are 60 years old. You know what I mean? I'm sitting there with my boots on. Right. So it's about like, guys, you can do this too. It's not about delivering the paper. It's about getting in front of the right people and getting your face out there.
And that means, but getting some jobs, whether it's in a retail store, I had a father who has a son. His name is Grant, the son. And he asked me if I would hire Grant as an intern to give him some experience. I'm like, yeah, as a favor, I will do that. Right? Sometimes parents trade favors, right?
All the time.
Right? So it's a college buddy of mine. He's a bank president. He's gonna, his son is playing around on the internet a lot. And so I hire him as an intern, trying to teach him real estate. I'm going to tell you. So... I get into this, and he's distracted, right? He's doing the internet. Well, he's selling. You've heard of this, right? He sells shoes, right? He buys the shoes, and he resells them, and he does T-shirts. And I'm trying to get him interested in real estate and business and all this, and his dad is trying to shift him over, right? And I finally said, Grant, look, he was making $170,000 gross a year in selling this stuff, and I finally went to call his dad back, and I'm like, okay, the internship's not working out. Bad news, internship's not working out. He's distracted with the internet, but the good news is Just leave him alone.
Right.
He will be successful. He's an awesome kid, and he's doing a great job selling on the internet.
Right.
And it may not be this. It'll be something else. This will lead him to something else.
Right.
But he's already successful, Dave. Like, leave him alone. Stop trying to channel him into an area that you want. He's not going to be a banker. Okay? He's not going to follow in your footsteps. He's going to be an entrepreneur, probably work for himself, just like you do, and he's going to be really successful at it. But let him do his thing.
And you know what? If I were you and Grant was in my office, the only point I'd be trying to make is, yo, Grant, you're making $100 off these shoes.
Right.
I'm making, whatever, $100 million off this project, $10 million off this project. All you got to do is transfer that hustle into bigger deals.
Exactly, right, yes. And he'll learn that over time.
Exactly.
He'll get there. Right.
All right, cool. I like this type of stuff.
So it's all about the energy, the enthusiasm, the passion, good fit for you as an individual. You don't have to follow in your parents' footsteps. My dad wanted me to become the CEO of his company.
Right.
Told me flat out, I want you to run the company. And I'm like, well, number one, I'm one of 10 children. One of my brothers died. So I'm one of 10. Dad, I'm not doing this for 10%. I'm not working as a slave for my siblings for the rest of my life.
I don't blame you.
You give me 51% or sell it to me, I will do it. Right? But he wanted to be fair, and okay, fine. Then I'm going to go do my own thing.
Let's be fair. Exactly.
I'll have way more wealth if I do my own thing, and I'm not held back by siblings who are conservative in terms of business approach, business risk. Who are afraid to grow and afraid to take new opportunities on. Right,
and let's talk about that because I'm kind of passionate about this. What your dad wants you to believe in is socialism. Hey, you work for all the other 10 people.
Yes, which he was a capitalist, and this was the irony, and I told him that.
So same thing with my...
Why are you trying to make this committee run the business?
Exactly.
This is what you taught. Don't have a committee run anything.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's where, that's what, I've bought all my own properties. My mom's helped me buy all my brother's properties. And I'm like, Ma, you pay his bills, you pay his credit card thing. And
he'll never learn.
He's going to be on you.
Right. Your parents can invest with you, but you should do the work, right? You should be doing the investment too. And doing the hard work to prove a return and pay them a return, right?
Parents out there, don't, I know, and I know it's different. I'm not a parent, so I really don't know, but I understand you're trying to push your kids forward. But there is a balance.
Sometimes it's best, just let them do what they're going to do.
Yeah, and don't say you're a capitalist, but practice socialistic activities.
Yeah, but it is hard. Hiring today is very hard.
Yeah, we got off on a tangent there.
Unbelievably difficult.
It's so
difficult
to
find the right person.
And Terrence, it costs a lot of money.
Jobs.
It costs us a lot of money.
Yeah. Well, what costs you a lot of money is you hire somebody and 6 months later you got to let them go. That costs you a lot of money.
Just happened to me.
You know what I mean? Right? Yeah. It happens to every business person.
It's crazy.
So don't feel bad. It's part of the cost of doing business. But I like to be fair. I like to, I tell them, look, if it isn't working out, I'm going to let you know. You are definitely going to know from me, if things aren't working out. I'm going to verbally tell you if it's not working out. I'm going to give you an email spelling it out in writing. If that doesn't work, I'm going to give you a letter detailing exactly what you need to change in behavior, et cetera. And if that doesn't work, you're going on probation or you're fired.
Okay.
Right? I gave one guy all these, this is kind of the system I use for firing.
Right.
And I gave one guy every opportunity. He was very successful, but decided to coast. I've had that happen a lot. They get in, they're successful, and I'm up here now. I can just coast, free. And they stop working. Like this one guy just stopped coming to work. He would be gone on Thursday afternoon, gone Friday. He'd show up at work on Monday at 2 p.m.
What was his position?
Helping with capital raising.
Okay.
Raising capital from investors. I have over 800 investors in our real estate.
Right.
And I told him flat out, I went through the whole system, put him on probation.
Wow.
And even during the 90-day probation, I don't think he worked more than 30 or 32 hours a week. And I just watched him do this to himself, right? He was a smart guy, very personable, very extrovert. He great getting along with people, great with talking to people. And I just watched him self-implode because he thought he could coast. He was making all this money. And I'm like, no, you got to keep working hard to keep making that money. You don't get paid unless you're going to bring in the capital, right? So On the day, the 90th day, the day of his, whether we're going to decide whether we're going to keep him or not, as a Monday, and I distinctly remember this, he shows up at 2 p.m. on that afternoon. On the day that we're going to meet, the meeting's already scheduled at 3 o'clock, to talk about whether we will keep him or fire him. And he shows up at 2 o'clock. And I sat down the boardroom with him, and the first words out of his mouth are, "Today's not a good day to fire me." And the first words out of my mouth were, "Well, you sure made it easy on me." Because if he had worked hard those 90 days, if he had put in the extra hours, put in the time, the energy, and had been successful bringing in more capital, etc., that would have been hard for me to fire him. And I wouldn't want to, right? I'd want to keep him. He made it easy because he didn't come to work a lot. He shows at 2 p.m. on the day he's going to have his meeting to discuss whether he stays with us or not. I mean,
what was his reasoning for today's not a good day to fire me?
He didn't have a reason. It was, he decided to go home to another city, to his parents' house for the weekend. And instead of coming back Sunday night, he decided to come back on Monday because he was lazy.
Maybe he had a drug problem or an alcohol problem or something.
No, it was definitely not either of those. He just got to the point where he thought it was okay. I had another guy I hired who's going to be my top salesperson, run the brokerage, and he was ranked number 1 in the country for 2 different employers. Number 1 in the country. Comes to work for me, 6 months later, I'm firing him. And at his firing, he literally said, "It's my own fault." Now, this guy actually had the courage to admit that he was the one at fault. He said, "Yeah, once I got hired here, I thought I'd made it so I could coast. And I just thought I could just relax and enjoy myself and not have to work hard like I used to." And now I know that that's not the case, and I totally understand if you're going to let me go. I'm like, yeah, I got to let you go. I can't have my other staff like learning the lesson from you that it's okay, to act like you have for the last 6 months.
Well, and that's what happens in these organizations. It becomes a cancerous.
Yes, it's cancerous.
It's a
tumor.
Why does he get to come at 2 p.m. on Monday?
Right.
Why can't I come in 45 minutes later? I need to take my kids to school.
Right.
And then you have 40 other people that you're paying payroll for.
Yeah.
You got to be on top of those people.
Right. And the thing is, when that starts happening, this is why big corporations have all these rules, unfortunately, right? In a small business, it's a family-oriented type of thing, right? You treat them like family.
Right.
You don't have to have all these rules.
Right.
And then one bad person comes along, one bad seed comes along and wrecks it for everybody, right?
Wrecks it.
So my rule is for business people and people like you is don't do what the big corporations, which is one person does one thing wrong, so you establish a rule. We're going to have a rule, and this is the way it's going to be for everybody. No. You go talk to that person, and you tell them to knock it off. I had a woman who was spending 3 to 4 hours in the office of my vice president of operations, taking up all his time, complaining about it. She's just a habitual complainer. She just wouldn't shut up. And she was in the accounting department. She should do her work and be quiet and just do the work. And no, she wants to complain about everybody and everything, and nobody's ever good enough, and everything's wrong. And he was letting this go. He was empowering her by agreeing to meet with her 3 to 4 hours a day that went on for months. And I finally went to him and said, "John, you either fire her or get her to stop this, or I'm firing you, because half your time is being used up by this, and I'm not paying for that. So grow some balls and get out there and do the job that you're supposed to do and set her in the right place or get rid of her."
Right.
Well, he didn't. Eventually, I had to fire him.
And her.
And then I went to her after I hired the replacement, and I said to her, "You are not going to spend 1 minute in the new office. I don't want to see you filing one complaint. I don't want to hear one bad thing out of you. I don't want you talking to anybody else. You're a habitual complainer, and I'm not putting up with it anymore." And I basically did what he should have done. And for the next 2 weeks, she didn't complain. She did her job, and then she quit.
Oh.
So she was looking for a new job, which is great. That's fine. I could have fired her, but I wanted to see what she would do. But I also didn't want her cancer to spread to the new guy, the new operations head,
Right.
and ruin that job
Right.
and that person, So I had to lay down the law for her, right? But the point is, the lesson is, I didn't make a rule for everybody in the company, right? I didn't, try to wreck it for everybody. No, why punish everybody? If she's the one that's the problem, You go to her, you talk to her, tell her to knock it off, you document it.
Right.
And if it doesn't happen, you do it a second time, and then you fire.
Right.
And you move on. But you don't let the cancer spread,
Right.
and you don't establish a bunch of rules that ruins it for everybody, right? That's not right for a small business.
Right.
You want to keep that family-oriented
like
atmosphere of the business. That's what made you successful, right?
Right.
You don't want to become a big corporation with thousands of rules,
Right.
because nobody's going to follow them all anyway.
Right. I like that a lot. Like that's a good point. And it's tough. These conversations are not easy.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, like as I'm listening to you and like, I feel like I need to grow a muscle of just like you said, like how long did you let your VP do that before you fired him?
It was too long.
Right.
Too long.
It's always too long,
It was
right?
months. And I should have taken action sooner.
Right. So if you would have fired him 3 months sooner, right? Like how much did he
But
cost
you have to give him a chance.
No, I
Right?
understand. I
That's the
understand.
thing.
But I just feel
even
like
if it costs me more money, I feel like I should give them a chance, because then I don't feel guilty about firing them, right?
Yeah.
I've given them every opportunity to be successul, and if it ain't working, then fine. I don't feel guilty at all.
Well, then
about getting
remove the
rid of that
nonprofit
person.
sign off your
Right?
desk.
Yeah. I do have a little plaque that says this is not a nonprofit organization.
No, I know, but you're
Right.
acting like. But oh man, I just get juiced up when I hear these stories because I don't want that in my organization.
But it's going to happen.
No, I know.
Don't pretend it won't.
It just happened.
Right. And the question is, what's right for you?
Should have
Is it
fired the
better to
lady
fire
4 months ago.
Maybe you can't afford to wait like 3 to 6 months like I can.
Right.
So you need to fire somebody sooner. And so you've got to accelerate the whole time frame. You got to say verbally, email, in writing.
Make it a 3-week process, not a 3-month.
But spell it out like here's a checklist.
Right.
So you pull out the checklist, say, have the talk. I'm starting the check. Everybody knows the checklist, right? I'm starting the checklist. You're on we call it the death spiral. The death spiral is you're in the death spiral, and honestly, I've only had one person who ever pulled themselves out of the death spiral, and he went on to be an employee of ours for 30 years.
And I guess that's the point I'm realizing in my
head. But he chose
head.
to do that. He chose to get out of it.
Right.
Yeah.
The odds are like the odds have been spelled out in your career. Like once they're in this way, they don't go back. I was just on a group call, and the one guy has a large organization like yours, and like instead of doing the 3-month death spiral, after the 2-week mark, he'll just say, "Hey, here's $1,000. Like quit your job," or it's like 1,000 or 2,000 or something like that. Like
So they quit this job, you mean?
Yeah, working for him. He puts him in like the PIMP or PIM or something. It's like it's basically exactly what you said, but it's an abbreviated thing.
Okay.
And that's what these corporations call it.
Okay.
And basically after a couple weeks, if it's still not going right after the first phase, he just says, "Hey, here's $2,000. Just quit your job." That way he doesn't have to wait another couple months, because he's done the numbers, and he looks at like if you have 150 employees and you have 5 people every year on this, 50, 60, 80, 100 grand.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to a different topic.
By the way, the other thing is just, is you fire people, then they go collect unemployment. Your rating goes up, costs you more. So if you can get them if they can quit on their own, you can't force them to quit, but if they quit on their own, then it doesn't affect that rating, from what I understand. So yes, it can get more and more expensive if you fire more and more people.
Makes sense.
So you understand.
I guess I gotta withhold my like Donald Trump, like you're fired. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's nice on TV.
Could kind of cost me a little bit of money.
Right, exactly.
Okay, so let's move on to like you started buying your first property 24. Your age is undisclosed today. We don't have to get into that if you don't want to. All right, and then but let's go through. Let's go through, like, I want to learn your time management skills and how you manage your time. This is something that I try to focus on, and I have a couple techniques, but how does Terrence manage his time to make sure he's moving the biggest ball forward, like, every day?
Yes, so I did discover a young age, because I'm dyslexic, so I will admit I discovered one advantage at a younger age, and that is that I should focus on my time and energy on things that I do well. That life is too short to waste my time working on the D grade versus working on the A grade class, right? So what do parents do when
you say DNA, that's real estate?
No, like when your parents, when you're in high school or college, you bring home a report card. Well, at least they used to bring it home. Sorry, throat's dry. And you get a bunch of A's, maybe a B and a C. And what do the parents and the teachers say to you?
What do they? I don't.
Yeah, they
remember.
look at the report card.
Okay.
What do they say to you?
They say, "Hey, you need to improve here. You need to
On
do
the C.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so what are they doing to you? They're telling you to focus your time and energy on the thing that you don't do well.
Oh,
Huge mistake.
I see.
This is a fatal flaw in our school system.
Right.
They focus on the things you don't do well. Instead, what they should say is, you know what? Let's get you out of that C class and let's focus you on the A classes,
Right.
things that you do well.
Right.
Thank you. And let's, that's where your passion is. You're interested in those classes. You do well in those classes.
Right.
So that's what I always say. So when I was 7 years old, they discovered that I was born with a heart defect. So I had a narrow aorta and I have a bicuspid aortic valve. So they decided to do an experimental surgery. I was one of the first kids in the country. I had open heart surgery when I was 7, and they cut out the narrow and sewed the two ends of the aorta together. And so I spent, now that today you would be in the hospital for a week. I spent 3.5 months in the hospital.
Oh my gosh.
Alone, right? With strangers coming and going in the
Yep.
beds. There was 4 beds in the room. Strangers coming and going. I do remember the nurse giving me the sponge bath. But I was 7, but my parents were busy. They couldn't visit too often. My dad came by once in a while, not very often. My mom came more often, but she had 10 other kids to worry about.
That's crazy. Yeah.
So I distinctly remember to this day, I remember in bed thinking to myself, I need to work twice as hard as everyone else because my life might not be as long as everyone else's.
I see.
When will I die? I won't have a life as long as everyone else at that time. And so I thought, I'm going to work twice as hard. I'm going to bust my ass. I'm going to get ahead. I need to accelerate everything by 50%, I said to myself, and get ahead. So if somebody was successful when they're 40, I need to do it when I'm 30. You know what I mean? And so that was my decision at age 7. Imagine that as a 7-year-old. First, what is that? First grade.
Yep.
I missed 3.5 months of school, so I repeated first grade. And so I made that decision, and that kind of influenced me going forward that I'm going to work harder, I'm going to work faster, work smarter, to get ahead in life.
That was an opportunity that God gave you. I know it's a setback in the short term, but same thing with my kidney transplant.
Right.
You got it earlier. That was a God-given opportunity.
Right. And so I didn't realize until college that I was dyslexic. And talking to the head of the Dyslexia Association at a party once and figuring it out. Because I couldn't finish a textbook. I couldn't finish reading one. I'd read stuff and I couldn't remember it. History books I was okay with because I could visualize that, So I was very visual. My English teacher stopped me in the middle of a report once in high school class. I was giving a report because I was mixing the names up. Like I interposed the pieces of the names and created 2 new names that didn't exist. And I didn't know that, right? And I was repeating that. So, you got to figure out when you're dyslexic, you got to figure out what are you good at. And I remember telling this, I was doing the rehab after my second open heart surgery a few years ago. I was doing, and one of the trainees was a mom, and she was telling me about her son. I'm like, and she was talking to the guy next to me, and I'm like, well, your son is dyslexic. She was like, what? I'm like, yeah, your kid is dyslexic. All those things you just described, he's dyslexic. Get him to focus on visual things. Get him to numbers. Have him look at, go meet with an architect. Go meet with an engineer. I'd be happy to meet with him as a developer. Get him to do things that are going to be successful at. Stop trying to get him to get an A in English class. It ain't going to happen.
Right.
Right?
That was my
so
issue
stop
too.
focusing on the C on the report card.
Yeah.
Focus on the A's. My dad, I was in T-ball and baseball as a kid. My dad never came to any of my games. I was horrible at it.
Really?
And I still thank God that he didn't come. Because what if he had come, like most parents today, and he had said, keep at it, let me help you, let's practice some more. Let's, you're great, you're a winner. And then when you lose a game, you won.
Right.
I literally had that happen once. And like, this is insanity. Thank God he didn't do that.
Right.
Because within 2 years, I realized I suck at this, and I got out.
Right.
And I did something that I was good at, which was biking, skiing, and I got on ski patrol. You know, got awards, for being the best ski patroller.
Yeah.
And I did things that I was successful at, working on the A, right, rather than working on the C.
Right.
So that's the key, is you got to realize for yourself, what are you good at,
Right.
regardless of what your parents think, just like that kid Grant, right?
Right.
He's good at what he's doing. He's not going to be a banker.
Right.
Okay, I'm sorry, but Dad, that's not going to work out.
Right.
So you got to move on and get to the thing you love doing.
I love this report card analogy, right?
Right.
You know, in school they teach you the wrong
Focus
strategy.
on the wrong thing.
Right.
Yeah.
You're saying, hey, I'm Terrence. I'm focusing on what I'm A's and B's, and I'm pushing forward at that, which makes 100% sense. So in today's in your business world, what are you focused on?
Well, I'm focused on building our portfolio,
Mm-hmm.
right? Building that out, looking at the new opportunities. We're in a cycle right now where we're on the bottom of the cycle where new opportunities really present themselves at a lower cost to me.
Mm-hmm.
So I just grabbed 4 new parcels of land that I got at much lower cost. I'm always focused on employees and hiring.
Mm-hmm. Do you have someone
culture.
that hires for your company?
No, it's more about the department. If the property manager needs somebody, she's going to interview and hire.
Okay.
And she doesn't need my authority or anything.
Okay.
Because it's on her. If
Right.
it doesn't go well,
Right.
she's the one who's going to suffer.
Right.
But the big thing is culture.
Mm.
I want to have the right culture in my company, so I always reinforcing the culture of, we work hard, we play hard. Part of the culture is, we work effectively and efficiently and productively. We don't want to be wasting time.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I'm not asking you to work 60 or 70 or 80 hours a week either, right?
Right.
You can take Friday afternoons off if you work hard the other 4 days of the week and you're putting in not the time, but the effort to get results.
Right.
So I'm constantly focused on results.
Right.
And building that culture. I think there's a lot of companies that sometimes they have the wrong culture. Might be a culture of fraud, or you know what I mean, right? You've seen big national corporations.
Wells Fargo?
Oh yeah, Wells Fargo's one of them. I was
A victim of the fraud.
a victim of that. And they had a culture internally that was, you should be doing things that you shouldn't be doing. And that comes from the top, right? So I feel I'm responsible for the culture of my business and, setting the right tone be aggressive, work hard, but, don't cross the line of breaking the law or whatever, because that's going to create more problems for us, right?
Right.
I'm always surprised that some businesses who are raising capital, they don't watch these securities laws as carefully as we do. We're very careful about that. Like on my tax return, I always leave something out in case I'm ever audited. And I was audited in 2000, I think it was 16. And, the IRS claimed I owed $10,000 roughly. And that's when my accountant pulled out of the hat, we forgot this expense and deduction,
Right.
which, as I said, I always instructed him to leave something off, an expense, a deduction, not revenue, but an expense or deduction that would be to my advantage, right?
Right.
So and he brings that forward, and he's like disappointed because he thought he got me, and they had me write a check, and then he admitted, okay, now you don't owe anything, but then he wouldn't leave until I paid $3,000, even though I didn't owe $3,000.
But at your level, it's
but
just
at least it would have cost me tens of thousands more in accounting fees. But the point is, the culture of, I have a culture of leave something off the tax return that's to my advantage. It's part of, look, don't put through too much. I'm not trying to deduct my home. I'm not trying to deduct part of my condo that I work out of in Florida in the wintertime as a business expense. I don't do that.
Right.
So leave something off. It's part of the culture of, this is how we operate, as a business, as a team.
Okay.
Right? But all the team members have to work together, help each other. That's part of the culture also. And that's part of hiring, firing. You're trying to get the right people on the team who are going to stick around for 20, 30 years. So it's, that's part of what I work on is the culture and the capital and the finding new opportunities.
Okay. And I guess one of my questions for you you have 24 hours in a day just like me. Like, how do you do, like, priority lists, right? So, like, I'm going to give you an example, and I want to hear your current life, analogy to this, right? So Chase owns a couple companies, right?
Okay.
My real estate portfolio, my main business, CMG Landscaping, my online presence, Lawn Pro.
Yep.
When I have, I'm an operator just like you. So I have things coming at me all day.
Right.
And how I operate is I keep my main business first tasks. Like if there's 5 things to do for CMG Landscaping and then there's 2 things to do for Galco, I'm doing CMG Landscaping tasks first because that's what's bringing me in my net profits, right?
Yep.
And then if I get time, whether it's at 9:30 or 7:30 the next morning, then I'm going to go reach out to my property manager, my contractor, pay that bill.
Yep.
Do you operate like that? How do you operate? Because you have multiple things going on as well.
Well, I have one rule, which is do the things that are quick and easy to get done first. And for some reason, human nature is that they want to take the most difficult task first, and that might eat up all your time, and you have no time left now to do the easy things. Yeah. So I say do the easy things first, so you get 90% of your plate clean, and then you're focused on the remaining one more difficult task that takes more time. And that's why I always say, I teach my staff in meetings with me, not only am I visual, I always communicate, okay, how should you communicate with me?
Right.
But I always teach them, don't start with the difficult thing, especially the thing that might upset me or piss me off. Right?
You got to bounce around, Terrence.
Now you got me in a bad mood, and then you want to do 10 other easy, simple things, and I'm in a bad mood, and you piss me off, and we ate up 90% of the time of the hour screwing around in this one bad thing. No, let's get the easy, simple things done first. And then with the time remaining, then we'll focus on the bad thing. And their attitude is, well, no, but this is the most important thing. I'm like, yes,
but this is how I want to operate.
But if you do this where you spend, 45, 50 minutes of the hour on that one bad thing, you don't have anything time left to get all the other stuff done.
Right.
So you're always going to be behind forever.
Right.
So get the 90% of the things done, and then we'll go to the bad thing, the more difficult thing. And then, by the way, I'm in a good mood then while we're doing those things. Right. So it goes faster. Right. I don't ask as many questions. Right. We get it done. Right. And then we get to the difficult thing.
Right.
Okay, fine. Now I'm ready, mentally, right? To
you
take
build
on
some
that
momentum
challenge.
Too.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And they also build, I always say, get to yes. So that means don't put a bunch of things in front of me that is no, no, no first, and then go to the yes, yes. No, get me into the habit and the practice in our meetings of saying yes first.
Sounds like you're giving your team the secret.
I am giving the secret sauce, yes.
You want a new company car? Say yes to the company toilet paper and the soap first.
Exactly, right. So get me in the habit of saying yes, train me, and then we'll get to the things that are more challenging that I might say no on. But you don't start with the no's, because then I might say no to the yeses. See how this works? And they're like confused. I'm like, look, this isn't hard. This isn't rocket science. Just start with the things you want me to say yes to that are easy. Build up momentum, right? Can you understand that?
Yes, I can.
What's funny is it's hard for them to do that. It really is. I don't know why. I always, when I meet with somebody in a negotiation, right, I get them in the practice of saying yes. I give them the easy things first. A lease negotiation, I always, especially with a lawyer, I always go to the things that the lawyer's going to be interested in, right? That he wants and that I could say yes to. So I break it, again, everything's broken into 3 groups. The things that I can say yes to that they want, the things that I have to say no to, and the things that are in the middle that maybe I can say yes or no to, depending on how the other things go. That's how I break every business decision down into those 3 groups. So then I start with the yeses for him. And then he's happy. Like, hey, we just spent 30 minutes and we went through a bunch of yeses, and he feels like he won. Right. And now he's happy. He's willing to say yes to those medium things for me. Right. He's willing to say yes to me for the medium things. And then we get to the no's. He understands, like, okay, yeah, you gave me all this other stuff. If he's not too greedy, he'll, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I like that.
He understands
strategy.
There's going to be some no's.
Right.
So, but if you start with the no's, like he's going to, things that I say, no, I can't give you this, and no, I can't give you that, no, I can't give you that. What are you doing? You're building a mind block. Now, by the time you get to the other stuff, he has a mind block. He's angry. His mind is blocked. He's not going to say, and now he's not going to give on anything.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
So it's about how you negotiate, to yes. Maybe I should call that a book, negotiate to yes.
Negotiate to yes. So let me ask you another question, Terrence. As a young entrepreneur, real estate investor, I wake up every day and I feel behind, whether I am or not.
Really?
I wake up every single day and I feel
Really?
I feel behind, and I feel like there's a list of things, whether it's 5 or 30, that I need to accomplish.
Yeah.
Do you ever feel like that, or do you pretty much feel like you're on top of everything?
I would say that I have organized my life. I used to make out lists, and I would do lists by the things I want to get done today, and then I have lists for things I want to get done in a week, and then I have the third group, again,
Bigger projects.
of things that take longer.
And then that list, does that sit on your desk at work?
It did used to, yes, but now that I'm the boss, I have everyone else make the lists, and I don't keep the list. They keep the lists, right, to get them in the habit. And that way you don't feel so overwhelmed, because you're going to go in, you want to get these 5 things done, and if you get those 5 things done today, you feel good, right? And the other things for the week, you have the week, and you're not going to wait till Friday, but you're going to work on maybe one a day or whatever.
Right.
You're going to get there, and the longer, and you've broken it down into manageable chunks, again, thirds, rule of thirds, and then you manage that so you don't feel overwhelmed. I know other people do feel overwhelmed, and the only way you can fix that is if you make lists. Right. And then you take it through and you feel like you accomplished something because you did check off some things you actually got accomplished.
Right.
Right. And then you feel good.
Right.
Otherwise, you're just going to go crazy.
Right.
Because, yes, if I wake up in the morning, my job never ends. It's 24/7.
Exactly my point.
Yeah. I wake up at 3 a.m.
And you have shit to do.
And I might do some emails, get those out of the way, and I'll do an hour or an hour and a half, and then I'll fall asleep again. Right? But I don't actually go to work feeling overwhelmed at all.
Okay.
Because I've got people on it. I got to make sure they're keeping their checklists in place.
Right.
And that we're moving through. Everything's a process. Our projects take years.
Right.
And years, I do get a little concerned, when the local governments start getting in the way,
Right.
putting conditions in place that we can't meet.
Right.
And I've walked away from projects.
Yep.
I walked away from a project in Watertown, Wisconsin. I lost $1 million.
Wow.
Because that's what we spent on engineering, soils, environmental, architecture, planning. Because the mayor put an artificial deadline in place and on the agreements, the contract. And I told her right up front, we'll never meet that. That's your deadline. We can never meet that because your city can never meet that under statutes.
Right.
If you lay out the public notices you have to give and all the hearings you have to have, there's no way we'll meet that deadline. And she knew this, but she did it to try to force us, right? We're not the problem.
Right.
Your city's the problem.
Can you sue them for that? Right?
I can't. No, not for that. I did sue another village once, though, because they were sabotaging our proposal. The mayor or the village president was literally using social media, Facebook, and going through his sister to try to stoke the fire with gasoline and get 100 people to show up in opposition to us, so he could use us as the issue for running for re-election. So it was all leading up to re-election. He wanted us to be the issue that he would to propel him to election. He'll
save the day.
Yeah, exactly. And so we did sue him, and we got we got records, and we subpoenaed his files and email and Facebook. We subpoenaed Google and Facebook, and we got all the records, and we found the smoking gun of his sister saying, my brother doesn't use social media, but he gives me all of the stuff he wants to say. So when I'm talking to you, it's like my brother talking to you. And that was the smoking gun. Where then he was stoking the fire, getting people to come to hearings, 100 people show up in opposition.
Yeah.
And this is the guy who's supposed to be unbiased, unprejudiced, giving us a fair hearing in a democracy in which I have rights, as a citizen, but also as a property owner.
Right.
And he wasn't doing that.
Right.
And so when we got that smoking gun, they quickly settled and wrote us a check for $450,000.
Wow.
To pay back. Now, we didn't make any money on that. I mean, that was just
Still lost money.
Yeah, it was the architect, the engineer, the lawyer, but at least we came out ground zero. Right. The other one, I came out with $1 million loss because that was just her putting a deadline in place that wasn't going to work. So yeah, I do get a little stressed out when I don't have control. I'm kind of a control freak.
Right.
I think most entrepreneurs are.
Yes.
Because you want to control the buckets to get to success.
Maximize the results.
Yeah. And if and when somebody else is in control making decisions and they don't have the consequences of their own decisions. You have the consequences.
Right. It's
That
your bank account.
freaks me out.
It would, I understand exactly where you're coming from. And people can say chill,
Yeah.
but at the end of the day, it's not their money.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
They don't have a staff of 40 people.
Right.
They don't make payroll every week.
Exactly.
They don't make the mortgage payments.
Right.
Their signature isn't on the debt contract.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, it's scary because
For all you employees out there thinking your boss
Yeah.
is fucking crazy, you sign the contract, guys.
Yeah. Yeah. You're signing the front of the check and you're signing the debt, the mortgages, the contracts, the legal services. It's
Sign the
endless.
contract, guys.
Yeah.
Sign it. All right, I have another question for you, Terrence.
Mm-hmm.
Can you think back to your toughest day as an entrepreneur in your entire career?
I don't really want to talk about that.
Okay. That was out of the blue, but we don't have to talk about it.
No, all right. I could. Yes. It was.
And the only reason I'm asking you this
Yeah.
is because I've had very tough days. People that
Yeah.
are watching have had tough days, and
Yeah.
I think it's really important
Yeah.
to just speak about that, and then we're gonna go from, hey, how did you get from there to keep going? You know what I mean?
Okay. Yeah. So this is hard to talk about.
Let's not talk about it then.
No.
Okay.
I think it's fair that it's people need to learn this lesson, right? If they can learn from this and avoid the mistake that I made.
Okay.
And this mistake I made was trusting people. And in 2007, I shopped around the country and I had the opportunity to bring in some additional capital to invest in my company. And so then we would grow, right?
Right.
And this was right before the big crash in '08.
Right.
So we closed the deal in November of '07, literally, a few months before everything started going downhill. And it was for a $110 million investment. My mistake was trusting the New Yorkers, typical New Yorkers, right, who seem to be trained in the concept of stealing Midwestern companies. That seems to be their thing. And so, I got the investment in, but we didn't take the total dollars in. It was a draw. So we draw it as new opportunities came up. We draw the capital. And so we created a board. They got 2 seats. I got 2 seats. And within very quickly, within 2 years, we had the Great Recession. Now, our company was generating $10 million of net cash flow a year. We were the best performing company, according to them, of their entire portfolio. They hadn't fully drawn. I think we drew about half of the money, 50 or 60 million, and the recession hit. But it was an opportunity for us to buy some properties on the cheap. We were getting lots of opportunities thrown at us.
Right.
And we had the capital, so let's do it, right? And their approach was, no, freeze everything. Don't. I'm like, this is what the capital's for. We can buy things for pennies on the dollar. This is what you committed to. You have to do this, otherwise the deal's, not the deal.
Right.
But their deal was they wanted to steal the business. They wanted to steal my company. $500 million of real estate, an entire net worth, 22 years of my life. And so very quickly, within 2 years, it deteriorated. And we got into a battle. They bought off my one of my vice presidents. They were meeting with secretly, and he was on the board. So they forced me to put him on the board. So they had 2 seats and I had 2 seats, and I was going to put a third party investor on,
right,
who represents the shareholders, right? And instead, they insisted I put on one of my VPs, and I didn't realize the trick was that they would control him and his vote by controlling his salary and his bonus. So they would use that as carrot and stick to get him to vote how they wanted rather than how the shareholders wanted, which is me and 200 other shareholders.
Right.
And so within, by 2012, it got bad. And I ended up, I remember the day, I had a lawyer. We had been fighting for 2 years. They were trying to they had these secret meetings. I ended up firing that VP. And then they threatened me. They literally said, I will bankrupt you. And that's a quote. Standing in their office in New York, I will bankrupt you.
You went to New York.
Yeah. To talk to them, to try to get, resolve this, right? And I was going to put a new board member on. And they said, no, you will put on this other VP of your company. Again, I didn't realize at the time it was because they were going to control that vote by controlling his salary, controlling his bonus.
Right.
And I didn't realize the game. I'm just a hard-working Midwesterner.
Right.
I'm not a sneaky, clever, under
corporate takeover
guy.
Right.
Like out of New York. Like they literally train these people in New York to do this stuff.
Right.
And So I put him on, and within 3 months it went downhill. Why? Because they were having secret calls and emails with him, undermining me. They were training him to undermine me. He flipped a switch on the computer to send all of my emails that I sent to my shareholders that were private. He would receive those, and he'd send them to New York. And they had him in his pocket. So I ended up removing him from the board.
Right.
And they went ballistic, and they threatened to bankrupt me again. They threatened to bankrupt me 3 times.
Okay.
And eventually, then in 2012, within 4 years, I ended up, leaving the company, my company. This is my business, my company. I founded it from college. I created it. I worked my ass off to build it.
Okay.
These guys come along, they look at us as the golden goose. So there's this recession, Great Recession. Their other partners were losing their asses.
Right.
They were looking to, they had pension money coming in. It had come in. And they wanted to provide a return to that pension funds, right? Because they would look bad, and they wouldn't get a carried interest either, right? If things were bad. So they looked at us as the golden goose that was producing the golden eggs. So they decided they would hijack my company, take it over, and then they would wipe out my equity and use that equity to provide the return to the pension funds for the losses on the other companies, and maybe give them a carried interest as well. So this was their goal, which they did execute on. And I didn't have good enough lawyers, in the Midwest, and I didn't have the clever, devious smarts. I just assume people tend to be honest, and I trusted them, and they're not, especially people from New York. No offense, New York City. I've seen this happen where they've taken over a number of companies in Wisconsin and just destroyed them, just train wrecked them, because they're trying to strip off the cash and the assets. And pile debt on there, and so they can walk away, So I ended up leaving my own company.
Right.
And that was the hardest day of my life. Was, I'm driving home and I'm thinking I just wasted 22 years of my life.
Wow.
I just flushed it all down the toilet. I don't know how I'm going to fight back. I don't know how I'm going to get these guys. I ended up filing a lawsuit later, which we just settled in the last month. So 14 years later, it took to try to, and I didn't get anything out of it.
Oh.
Because, frankly, the judge who was in charge of our lawsuit decided to dismiss the case because she decided to run for the Supreme Court of Wisconsin. So she was clearing the decks, clear her calendar, so she could, run for higher office. So I got screwed again. When you're going to court, you think you're going to get justice for your investors. It's not about me. I'm not trying to get anything for me. I'm trying to get, their equity back.
Yep.
And so, I lost everything. But in 2010, I started a second company, which was the multifamily, and started to build the multifamily separately on my own.
I see.
And so when 2012 came, I had that business up and running. I was able to transition to that and start really ramping up on the multifamily, really focus on that. And ironically, my net worth today is more than triple what it was back then.
Right.
So even though I lost a lot, my entire net worth, I did have a rainy day fund, so I was able to get through, the transition.
Separate from this business.
Yeah. And so it was very, very trying, very emotional. Very humiliating.
Yep.
And very, you tried losing your entire business after 22 years. Not out of your own fault. I could handle that.
Right.
But it was because it was stolen.
Right.
And I felt I wasn't smart enough. And I didn't have good enough lawyers.
Right.
To fight back properly.
Right.
They don't have the same rules in New York. They seem to have a different set of rules to operate under than we in the Midwest.
We have to look into that. So when you brought on these investors in 2007,
yep,
they bought equity into your company, or was they were providing cheaper capital? Like what was the advantage?
Yeah. So first I had the company. The first stage was I ran it myself, and was growing it myself. The second stage was in 1999. I brought in 200 investors to invest in the business, so I could build a 440,000 square foot office building, two office towers,
right,
8 stories, and grow the business. And that worked really well. So that was going very well. It was cash flowing great. And then 2007, this is a story of, or a lesson of, don't become too big. Like, you don't need to become big to be happy. You get too large, and you're going to become very unhappy because you become an HR manager.
Right.
You're no longer an entrepreneur.
Right.
You're unhappy. People are always trying to take from you. They target you. So don't become too big. But so then, 2007, I thought, well, let's bring in more money. So I brought in a commitment, $110 million, so we could grow in other cities, around the country. And we would draw on those funds to buy properties.
Right.
Right. But then the Great Recession hit. Now, the irony is then we really should have done it because we could have bought for pennies on the dollar.
Right.
And they were too afraid.
Right.
They trying to shut everything down. They didn't want us, acquiring stuff. So they were trying to get into my business, running the business day to day, and that was not allowed in the agreement. They're on the board to get to make the big decisions of the budget.
Right.
They would not approve the budget just to try to default us on payments to their equity, right? Their notes, their debentures, right? And they conspired with my VP not to make the payment until I found out, and then I made sure the accounting department made the payment. But they were literally trying to just muck it up, right? Chum the waters, put molasses in the machinery, you know what I mean? And I was trying to grow the business.
Right.
How naive of me, I didn't know what the rules of the game were. I thought the rules were we grow the business. If I'm successful, you'll be happy.
Right.
No, the rules were they want to steal the business.
It's a corporate takeover strategy.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
And it had nothing. They didn't want to grow.
Right.
They didn't want to use their money for growth. You know what I mean?
They wanted
to steal the company.
So it sounds like what they bought into your company.
Yes. So we
Right.
set up a new holding company.
Right.
Yeah, and they invested.
Right.
Yes.
Now, were you
with
able to take
debentures.
chips off the table when this deal got signed?
Well, I ended up contributing all the properties in. So no, I didn't, and that was probably a mistake too. I should have taken something off.
Right.
For a bigger rainy day fund.
Right.
They were also insistent on that not happening. Right. They didn't want me to take chips off the table that they were putting on the table. They wanted it all for growth, allegedly. I found out later the entire scheme was planned from the beginning to take control of the company. That this was how they did it. They had a program,
A strategy.
Strategy, yeah, to do this. And
Right,
they'd done it. They'd been sued by another developer too. They'd done this elsewhere. So I didn't understand that. Right? I was too naive to think that this was about taking over the business. I should have realized that when I had to fire the first VP. I had to fire my in-house attorney too, because he tried to defraud me by exchanging an exhibit in an agreement. He exchanged an exhibit out, put an exhibit in that gave him more options that I never agreed to. And he told the law firm to do this, and that was a lie. So I had to ask him to leave the state and never come back.
Why the state?
Because I didn't want to see his face.
Oh, I see. I see. Okay.
After he did that, and I
Right.
caught him,
Right.
no harm done because I was able to put the correct exhibit back in. But yeah, the whole thing was just mucking it all up and messing with our team and changing the culture to one of deceit and lying and secretiveness and secret meetings and so you bring in outsiders. I don't today. If you ask me, I wouldn't recommend bringing in outsiders. As long as you maintain control, you have to maintain control. It's your business. You're the entrepreneur. How many times have you seen businesses where they took the entrepreneur out? They took Steve Jobs out of Apple. What happened? Right? They put Steve Jobs back in, takes off again. Right? How many times have you seen that in corporate America? A lot.
I've seen it a lot. I've heard I've heard this story. I've heard other guys local to this area say, "Hey, never sell Wall Street." And then I see on the opposite side, I see guys that literally their business model is partnering with home service companies, growing them, and bundling them off to Wall Street.
Yeah, and that's fine if that's your strategy, and you sell it and you get out, and then you go do the next thing.
Right.
That's fine. Right? If I ever were to have a business and I went public, I would get out. I would, maybe I'd stay for a year or two or three. But in my head, I'd be saying, I'm going to exit this.
Take the chips off the table.
Exactly. I'd get my money off. Maybe I'd stick around to transition it, and then I would get out. Right? But I wouldn't stay in if I didn't control. Because too many people on the outside, they can't do it, so they try to steal it from people like you and me that can. We can build companies. There's a lot of great Americans out there, Midwesterners in particular, that can build businesses. And I suggest, keep running that business, keep operating, keep control. Don't get so big that you need Wall Street or you need huge chunks of capital where somebody's going to get their claws into you and take over or make you answer to them. when they're not running the business. They're not signing the debt. They didn't build it. They don't know how. That's why they're in that business of doing what they're doing, because they can't build a business. They don't have the skill set.
Right. Their skill set is having
Finance,
expensive
numbers.
lawyers
Yeah,
to
exactly.
tell them, hey, here's how you can legally do
Steal
X,
the
Y, and
business.
Z.
Yes,
And that's
exactly.
how, as a young guy right now, I low-key kind of look up to, now this is before you give me the story, I low-key look up those New Yorkers, those Wall Street guys. Hey, man, they're the ones that are crushing it. They're the ones that are making tens of millions. They're the ones that do all this stuff. But you don't see behind the scenes of how they're doing it.
Yeah. I mean, how many companies have you've seen this and you find out it's fraud? How many times? We've seen this throughout history, right, in Wall Street. So many companies, it was just complete pyramid scheme. It was total fraud from day one. And so don't go believing that they're doing it. They're cheating. Right?
That's the point I was trying to make to end that is exactly you see the outside, you see, hey, they use very fancy terms when they're talking about what they do.
That's to make you feel little.
Yeah, and uneducated. You know what I'm saying? When really they're just it's a pony trick scheme when they're basically tricking you. Yeah, I know all this. I got this capital.
Right.
They're going to use you and abuse you and spit you out.
Yeah. Well, I was talking to a wealthy family in Wisconsin about investing with us, and they chose, it was between, I know it's going to be hard to believe, but their choice was between us and Goldman Sachs. And they chose Goldman Sachs. And guess what? Things didn't work out.
Really?
They were promised, and they lost money. But there's kind of a bias in the Midwest, and I consider Pennsylvania a lot of Midwest because it's hardworking Midwestern culture and attitude, right? It's a lot of industry, right? But the attitude is sort of we're not smart enough. We got to listen to these guys from New York. We got to listen to these guys from the East Coast, that we can't do it without their help.
Right.
That's not true.
Right.
They just don't operate under the same rules. And when they don't have rules and you have rules, you're going to lose, because they're willing to break the law. They're willing to violate their agreements and contracts, whoever they are, and you aren't. So you're going to lose. So don't get in bed with them, focus on what you can do, in your business, your industry, without trying to get so big that you'll become miserable.
Right.
You know what I mean?
No, you definitely want to be happy. But would you agree that at times of your business career, like you just explained, it's not always happiness. It's not always, you know what I'm saying? Like obviously 78% of the time I'm a happy guy. I really just I've shared to you, I'm just blessed to be breathing, walking, and talking.
Right.
So let alone doing business stuff.
We have a different
outlook,
I think, because of the health conditions and issues. Every day I have to fight to stay healthy and stay alive. I just went in for another surgery 3 years ago, to replace the valve.
Yep.
And so every day I focus on health. I got to stay healthy, because
Diet,
if I don't,
medications,
exactly,
doctors, appointments,
right.
people that
It's
are
endless,
watching this,
isn't it?
It's endless.
It's endless.
And I have a lot of passion for this, and sometimes I share it on my Instagram. Yeah. People that aren't in this life, they have no context of what we go through just to get a goddamn pill in our mouth to
exactly.
Remove the gout out of my foot so I can go do estimates. You know what I'm saying? So going back to this,
and to you that you will probably have to have another kidney someday.
Yep.
And so you have this look in the future, like, how long do I have before that happens, right? I knew that I would have to have a aortic valve replacement someday. And my doctor said, look, our job here is just to keep you alive until the new technology comes out with the new valve. He said, that's my goal. And at Mayo Clinic. And he was right, and he did a good job. But it gives you a different philosophy, on life about how long do you have. Do I want to work harder to get where I want to be? I don't have as much time. You know what I mean? It was ironic because my grandfather died when he was 57 of the same thing. His father, my great-grandfather, died at 57 of the same thing. And I ended up going in for surgery when I was 57 for the same thing. But fortunately, I got the new technology and the new valve, and I'm good to go, for the rest of my life. But it does give you, and me, a different philosophy, a different approach to life, because life is short, right? We don't know how long we have. We're not going to waste a day.
Yes.
I always look at that. I'm not going to waste a day. Now, don't get me wrong. I may go to a state park or a national park and go hiking. That's not wasting a day. That's I'm enjoying life. I'm out there hiking. I'm with Lambo, my dog, and
Yes.
That's great. You know what I mean, right? But in business, also, I don't want to waste time with people who are lazy or trying to steal my business or whatever. You gotta separate those people off and get them out.
Zero time for that.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean? Zero time. And I think you look at myself, and I'll hang out with some of my high school peers. The way I move out throughout a day is completely opposite.
Yeah.
All right. Like I'm voice memoing email responses. I do. I'm on a whole other pace. I'm not bragging when I say this. It's just going back to like I'm built a little differently, not because of my choice, by the way.
No, right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, you were born with this.
Yeah. So, and that's why I look back on a lot of my stuff, and even today, like I do thank God because maybe it's obviously His plan of like, I'm building a creature like this. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Like it, when I was sitting there sick, not knowing who's going to give me a kidney, it really sucked.
Yeah.
But, now I'm sitting here and we, we're building things or, we're doing podcasts, we're building businesses, like shit that I get juiced up about.
Right.
One thing I want to do, one thing I want to say while we're on this topic about business and not every day is going to be perfect. I have a mentality, and I tell my CMG University students this, you have to have a mentality of do whatever the fuck it takes.
Yes.
Obviously staying within legal bounds.
Right.
But not every day, guys, you're going to wake up and do what you want.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah.
Like
it's not going to be easy.
It's not going to be easy.
You got to be willing to work hard for it.
So hard.
Right.
And you're going to get set back. You're going to get 4 steps backwards. You're going to be like, I just spent 6 months training this person, or I just lost 60 grand on this house or this stock or da-da-da.
Yeah.
You got to get up the next day and do whatever it takes.
Yeah, exactly. And I look at it as you build wealth, and it's not a straight line. It's stair-stepping. So you little chunk of wealth, and then you plateau, and you get prepared for the next thing, and then a little chunk of wealth building, and then plateau, and you just walk up the stairs over time. That's the way I view it. But life is more of a game of whack-a-mole, which is, pops. You remember whack-a-mole? You go to
I
Disney?
remember it very well.
I'm really good at it, actually.
I love that shit.
And, pops up, bam,
I want to break the goddamn thing.
I can anticipate, right? There's a pattern, and you can do really well with it. But that's life. Problems are going to come up. That's the mole, and you're going to whack it down, right? And you just got to get used to that. And I think a lot of people are unable to, to tackle life that way. Because if you understand that, look, life's whack-a-mole, and it's just going to happen. It has nothing to do with you. Yes. You didn't do anything wrong. It's just the way life is, and bam, 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 and you're prepared for it. And it's like, no big deal. Okay, I'm just going to do this. I'm going to work harder so I can hit that next one. You know what I mean?
Terrence.
That's the way it is. Most people freak out.
Yes.
Because they think life should be, people in government, life should be steady, no change, no challenges. It should just be flat water.
Right.
That's not life.
What you're describing is what I've been like. It's a muscle you build up as an entrepreneur investor. You start from a young buck. Oh, I'm going to go buy real estate. I'm going to go start businesses. Yeah. And then you start getting hit with problems.
Yes.
You get bogged down because you're like, holy cow, I got all these problems stacked on top of me.
Yes.
And then you get to the point that you just described where it's like, I could give a fuck about 38 problems. It's just part of it's just like eating breakfast in the morning.
Exactly. You say like, hey, this is part of normal life. It's just the way the business is. You're going to have these roller coasters where it's really, really challenging. And then you have a nice downhill ride and you relax and you go on vacation or whatever. And then it's going to get difficult again. Yeah. The big thing is don't create problems for yourself. I see that a lot.
Okay.
I don't know if you ever notice that when you hire people, like most of the time when people end up getting fired, it's because they did it to themselves. Okay. It wasn't because of me or the market or the industry. Like, let's say interest rates go up, and let's say that hurts us in business, right?
Yep.
Okay, that has nothing to do with it. We have no control over that. Yep. That's not your fault. It's not my fault. That's a challenge we got to overcome. Mm-hmm. Okay, but that's not the case with most people. Most people fail because they put up roadblocks in front of themselves. Stop putting up roadblocks in front of yourself, right? And you will be successful.
What's an example of that? I'm confused.
Like the guy I was interviewing, the other week, and he was kept, well, I don't know if this is going to be a good fit. I don't know if this, I don't know if that's, he's putting up all these mental roadblocks in front of him, and, I'm like,
You can't,
why are you doing this? I know you're successful, you're smart, you could do this.
You see it in them. One thing I like to talk about on my Instagram too is fear. Fear represents false evidence appearing real.
Yeah.
And I repeat that to myself throughout my year because everyone has fear factor, and a lot of guys just getting started in the business have that.
Yes.
They'll come to my coaching calls and, well, what about this? I'm like, dude, that's fear, false evidence appearing real. It's a problem that hasn't even occurred. You're just making it up.
Exactly.
It might not ever happen.
Right. That's what I see a lot of. And so then they stop, right? I always say, and they'll say, well, I can't buy a property because I don't have any money. Okay, first, I didn't have any money either. So I suggest you go get the property first. Don't worry about the money until second. Get the property under contract.
Yes.
Then once you have the property, you can go attract the capital somehow. We'll get creative on that next step. But don't sit there, I can't do anything. I can't do anything because I don't have the capital. I'm not rich. I don't have the money. You know what? Every entrepreneur has started off life without having any money.
Yep.
Okay?
Yep.
They all did.
Yep.
So that's not an excuse.
Go get a job, dude.
Go do it, and then you'll find the money.
Figure it out.
Friends, family, people you know, if you have a great idea and you can execute. If you show them you can execute and work hard, they'll invest in you.
Yes.
I have over 800 investors.
Yep.
And that's despite the fact that, on that previous office portfolio, we got screwed. You know what I mean?
I know.
But that wasn't necessarily my fault, other than maybe I wasn't sneaky and smart and devious enough. You know what I mean? That's the only thing you could probably say.
But teach me this stuff. This is stuff I want to know, so I can
bust your ass.
Yeah,
work
but
hard.
Later on after the podcast, I want to know these things. That way I can see the shit coming. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's like that phrase.
Yeah, you can learn from other people.
Yeah.
The challenge is, yes.
Yeah, because they're going to think they're talking to some blonde-haired landscaper, but I want the ammo in the back of my head. All right. Yeah, this is, I think we really hit it.
Yeah.
I think we're good.
One thing I would add.
Yeah.
When I was up and coming as a young guy, when I would go meet with, I told you about a mentor, a business car dealer, John Lancaster, really treated me very well, and a lawyer, it was his business partner. I would go meet with them, and I might have to sit for 3 hours waiting for them, even though the time we were going to meet at 10 a.m. or whatever. I might not see them until 2 p.m., right? So I was smart enough, I'd bring my computer, I'd just do my work sitting in their lobby, right, until they were ready. And it was because they were busy doing other things. But I didn't get all. But today, what would the kid do? I'm out of here. 20 minutes. I'm out of here. Well, I'm not sitting here waiting for you. If you want to be successful and you're going to work with older people who are going to hopefully maybe invest with you or work with you, you need to be patient. You can always do emails. You can always do other work. But I am stunned at this generation that they just don't have the patience to thrive. Patience to thrive, which is say work with people, go down to City Hall, don't email them. Go talk to the person in person. You're going to get a yes more likely than an email, which is easy to say no to.
Yes.
So go in person, Don't sit there in your office and complain or, you're not willing to. I like tell them, go down there and sit in the office. Well, she's never there, like blah, blah, she won't be.
Find out when she's there.
Yes, find out when she's there and go sit on her door. I've done that. Go sit on her door until she shows up, and she'll know you're serious. And then you grab her and talk to her, right, if it's city staff. That's what I did. Why can't you do that?
And not physically, guys.
No, right. That's figuratively speaking.
You gotta clarify for these young bucks. They'll think, you know what I mean? Like, they'll be like, oh my God, he's grabbing the women in the office.
I know.
Okay, yeah, I agree with that so much, man. There's people, like, as I get older, I used to think and anyone can do anything. Let me clarify this.
Exactly. Yep.
Sub that phrase. The more and more I get into it, there's people that do and there's people that don't. There's people that have it, there's people that don't.
Right.
And stay the fuck out of my lane if you don't have it.
Right. It's just like the people driving on the left lane on the highway going slow. Get out of the way.
Yep.
Yeah.
T-Wall, this was a great podcast, dude. We're going to go viral with this stuff and help out a lot of people.
Great. Yeah. If they can help learn and build their business, that'd be great.
Yes.
Great talking with you.